Have you ever felt invisible? Like you're screaming on the inside, but no one hears you? That was Ben's life. A 10-year-old boy with autism, trapped in a world that didn't understand him. People saw him as strange, quiet, difficult. But they didn't see the storm inside, the fear, the confusion, the loneliness. He didn't speak much, he didn't play with other kids, and he never smiled. Until he came along, not a therapist, not a family member, a dog, abandoned, unwanted, just like Ben. And somehow, they understood each other without saying a word. What happened next left everyone speechless. Because this dog didn't just change Ben's life, he saved it. Ben's parents loved him. They did everything they could for him. But there was something they couldn't fix. They couldn't see the world through Ben's eyes. They couldn't understand how hard everything was for him. They tried. They really did. They took him to doctors, therapists, and specialists. They followed all the advice they were given. They read books and articles. They tried to make his world safer, quieter, and more predictable. But no matter what they did, it never felt like enough. They could see how Ben struggled. They saw his fear when things got too loud or too bright. They saw how he pulled away when people got too close. But they didn't know how to reach him. And that was the hardest part. Ben wasn't broken. He wasn't being difficult on purpose. He just couldn't handle the world the way everyone else could. But his parents didn't have the answers. They loved him, but they felt helpless. Every day, they watched him pull further away, as if a wall was growing between them. His parents didn't know how to break it down. It was like Ben was trapped in a world of his own, and they couldn't get to him. At school, things weren't much better. Ben hated the noise, he hated the crowds, the hum of voices, the chatter of kids laughing and talking. It was too much. It felt like the walls were closing in on him. When the bell rang and the hallways flooded with kids, Ben just wanted to escape. He wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. His teachers tried to help. They could see Ben was different, but they didn't know what to do. They knew he was smart, but he barely spoke. He didn't look at them. He didn't raise his hand. It was like he wasn't even there. And sometimes, that was the hardest thing for them. They had no idea how to get through to him. There were other kids in the class, of course, but Ben didn't connect with them. They didn't know how to talk to him. They didn't understand why he acted the way he did. Ben would sit quietly, alone at his desk. When the other kids played, he stayed on the edges, watching them from a distance. They'd call out to him sometimes. "Why don't you play with us, Ben?" they'd ask. But he couldn't. He didn't know how. And the other kids didn't get it. They didn't understand why Ben didn't talk, why he didn't smile, why he never joined in. Some of them thought he was strange. Some just didn't care. Ben didn't fit in, and no one really knew how to help him. There was no one to talk to, no one who really understood. So, Ben kept to himself. He sat quietly, avoided the noise, and kept his head down. It wasn't that he didn't want to fit in. It was just that everything around him felt like a storm. Loud, overwhelming, and impossible to escape. And every day, it felt like that storm was getting worse. Ben was alone in a crowded room, a child in a world that didn't know how to understand him. But, like a crack in a wall, something was about to change. Something that would make everything feel different. Something that would make Ben feel seen for the first time. One chilly afternoon, a new presence arrived in the neighborhood. It wasn't a friendly, well-groomed dog. It wasn't a puppy with boundless energy and a wagging tail. This dog was different. It was a stray with matted fur, sad eyes, and a thin, hungry body. It walked slowly down the street, looking lost. It wasn't interested in playing or running around like the other dogs. It was simply looking for a place to rest. The dog had clearly been through a lot. It was abandoned, neglected, and alone, just like Ben. No one knew where it had come from or how long it had been wandering the streets, but somehow it ended up in Ben's neighborhood. Ben noticed the dog right away. He had never seen it before. It wasn't like the other dogs in the area, the ones with collars and owners who walked them in the park. This dog seemed different, quiet, just like Ben. Something about the dog caught Ben's attention. It was the way it moved, slow, cautious, almost like it was searching for someone or something. As the dog wandered closer to Ben's house, something shifted inside him. He felt drawn to it, even though he wasn't sure why. It wasn't like Ben had ever been a big fan of dogs. In fact, he'd always been nervous around them. The loud barking, the wagging tails, the jumpy energy, none of that was something Ben could handle. But this dog was different. There was no bark, no wagging tail, just quiet movement. Ben wasn't sure what it was, but something inside him clicked. The dog didn't look like it was trying to impress anyone. It didn't seem to care whether Ben saw it or not. It didn't try to be friendly or cute. It simply existed in its own quiet way. And that was something Ben understood. For the first time in a long time, Ben didn't feel overwhelmed. He didn't feel like he was being judged. He didn't feel like he had to be normal. He just felt seen. The first time Ben stepped outside to meet the dog, it was awkward. Neither of them knew what to do. The dog stood still, watching Ben with cautious eyes, its tail hanging low. Ben took a few slow steps closer, unsure of what would happen next. The air between them was thick with uncertainty, but neither of them rushed. There was no need for words, just a quiet moment, full of hesitation. And then, something strange happened. The dog didn't move away. It didn't bark or growl. Instead, it simply looked at Ben, as if waiting for him to make the next move. It was like the dog was giving Ben permission to be himself. No pressure, no demands, just a soft, understanding gaze. In that moment, something shifted. Ben didn't feel alone anymore. He didn't feel like the odd one out. He felt a subtle connection with the dog, a connection that didn't need words or explanations. It was like they both understood each other without saying a thing. The dog didn't judge him. It didn't expect anything from him. It didn't care about the way Ben looked or the way he acted. It simply accepted him, quiet and still. And for Ben, that was everything. It was the beginning of something new, something that would change his life forever. As days passed, something incredible began to happen. The stray dog, once a quiet observer in Ben's life, became something much more. It became Ben's safe space. When Ben felt overwhelmed, when the world around him felt too loud, too fast, the dog was there. No questions, no judgments, just calm. The dog was a steady presence that helped ground him, a gentle reminder that he wasn't alone. At first, Ben didn't say much to the dog. He wasn't used to talking to anyone, especially not about his feelings. But the dog didn't need words to understand him. Whenever Ben sat quietly in the yard or lay on the couch, the dog was by his side, curled up close, offering silent comfort. It was like the dog knew when Ben needed space and when he needed someone to just be there. Over time, Ben began to talk to the dog more. At first, it was just small words. A simple hello when he walked in the door, or you're a good boy as he petted the dog. But slowly, something shifted. Ben started to say more. He began sharing his thoughts with the dog, even if he didn't say them out loud to anyone else. It wasn't like Ben had a conversation with the dog, but the dog's quiet presence gave him the courage to speak. The dog was the first one to hear Ben's voice outside of his family. Their bond grew stronger every day. The dog seemed to understand Ben's moods better than anyone else. When Ben felt sad or frustrated, the dog would curl up beside him, offering a comforting nudge with its nose. When Ben was excited or happy, the dog's wagging tail seemed to match his energy. It was like the dog knew how to navigate Ben's emotions, offering him exactly what he needed without ever trying to change him. This connection gave Ben something he had never had before: peace. The world still felt overwhelming at times, but when the dog was with him, it didn't seem as hard to handle. Ben didn't feel the need to hide as much. He didn't feel the same kind of loneliness that had followed him everywhere. Slowly, the changes began. It wasn't huge or dramatic at first, but Ben started to smile more. When he saw the dog, a small grin would tug at his lips. It wasn't much, but it was enough. His family noticed. They noticed how Ben seemed more at ease, how he seemed to be less withdrawn. They noticed that Ben was beginning to open up, just a little bit at a time. He started to interact more with his family. At dinner, he spoke up, even if it was just to share a thought or a simple comment. At first, it was hard. Ben wasn't used to being part of conversations. But with the dog around, he felt braver. The dog didn't expect anything from him. It didn't push him to be anyone he wasn't. It simply accepted Ben, just as he was. And then, Ben started to open up to the other kids at school. It wasn't easy. He was still nervous. But he had the dog to thank for his growing confidence. When he saw the dog, he felt calmer. And that calmness helped him face the world outside his home. The dog didn't try to change Ben. It didn't force him to talk more or act differently. It just gave Ben the space to be himself. And that was enough. In its own quiet way, the dog had shown Ben the power of unconditional love. It had given Ben a safe place to exist. And in return, Ben was learning to open up little by little. The bond between them had become something stronger than either of them could have imagined. It wasn't just a dog and a boy anymore. It was a partnership, a friendship that would change both of their lives forever. One day, something changed. It wasn't a big moment or a sudden burst of happiness. It was quieter than that. Ben reached a new level of connection. He wasn't the same boy who had hid behind walls of silence and fear. He wasn't the same boy who avoided people and shied away from touch. It wasn't magic. It wasn't a miracle. It was something more real. Ben's parents noticed it first. At home, things were different. Ben was more present. He didn't retreat to his room the way he used to. He wasn't always lost in his own thoughts, his eyes distant, as if he were somewhere else. Instead, Ben was sitting at the dinner table engaging in conversation, even if it was just a few words at a time. It wasn't a flood of words or emotion, but it was a start. And for his parents, it was huge. They saw him smile more. A real smile, not just a quick twitch of his lips, but something that reached his eyes. It made his parents' hearts swell. They had waited so long for this, for any sign that Ben was starting to feel at home in his own world. And now, with the dog by his side, they were finally seeing it. But it wasn't just at home. Ben's growth was noticeable outside, too. He was starting to feel more comfortable in social situations. He was still quiet, still shy, but there was a shift. When he went to school, he didn't avoid the other kids as much. He sat at the lunch table with them, not always speaking, but there, present. And that alone was a victory. The walls he had built around himself were starting to come down. It wasn't an overnight transformation. It took time. There were still moments when Ben retreated. There were still times when he felt overwhelmed. But the difference was, now he had the dog. The dog was always there, offering the same calm presence, the same quiet companionship. The dog was more than just a pet. It was the key to Ben's emotional growth. One day, there was a family gathering, a small get-together with close relatives. Ben had always hated these kinds of events. The noise, the small talk, the laughter that felt too loud. But this time, it was different. Ben didn't immediately go hide in his room. He stayed with the family, sitting quietly, watching the conversation, taking it all in. And then, something even more surprising happened. Ben spoke. It was only a few words, but they were words he wouldn't have said before. He joined in. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make everyone stop and notice. His parents exchanged a look. This was the breakthrough they had been waiting for. Ben had reached out. He had connected. And it was because of the dog. The dog had been the bridge between Ben and the world. It had shown Ben that it was okay to trust, to open up, to let people in. The dog had taught Ben something that no one else could: unconditional love. It had taught him that he didn't have to be perfect. He didn't have to change to be accepted. The dog never judged him. It never expected more than he could give. It simply accepted Ben for who he was. And that acceptance, that calm, steady love, was the foundation that Ben needed to grow. The dog didn't fix Ben. It didn't wave a magic wand and turn him into someone else. But it helped Ben feel safe enough to start showing the world who he really was. The dog didn't change him. It brought out the best in him. Every day, Ben was learning more about himself. With the dog by his side, he was learning to trust, to open up, to smile again. The dog wasn't just a companion. It was a lifeline, a quiet, loving anchor in a world that had once felt too big, too loud, and too confusing. As time went on, Ben grew more confident. He learned to navigate the world with a little more ease, a little more strength. And the dog was right there with him, every step of the way. They had both changed together. And for Ben, it had all started with a quiet dog who never judged him, just loved him for who he was. As Ben's world slowly started to change, so did the way others saw him. His teachers began to notice a shift. They saw him participating more, even if it was just a little. At first, they thought it was just a phase, but then they realized it was something deeper. Ben wasn't just quieter anymore. He was more engaged. His eyes weren't distant. He was starting to look at people when they spoke to him. It wasn't a huge change, but it was enough for them to see that Ben was no longer hiding behind the walls he had built. His family felt it too. They saw the way Ben smiled when he walked into the room, or how he'd sit with them at the dinner table, talking just a bit more than he used to. It wasn't a sudden transformation, but they could feel the shift. Ben wasn't the same boy who once avoided their eyes. He was more present, more in tune with the world around him. They could see that he was becoming the person he was meant to be. And then there was the dog. People began to see the dog's role in Ben's life. It wasn't just a pet, it was a quiet force that had helped Ben find his way. The dog had been there for him when no one else understood. The dog had taught Ben something that no one else could, that he wasn't broken, that he didn't need to change, that he was enough, just as he was. Ben's parents realized that the dog wasn't the solution to everything. It didn't fix all of Ben's problems, but it had helped him open up, helped him trust again, and most importantly, it had helped him feel loved. The dog showed Ben that he didn't need to be fixed to be happy. He didn't need to change to be worthy of love. The dog didn't expect anything from him. It simply accepted him. And that was the biggest lesson of all. Ben wasn't fixed. He wasn't better. But his life had been transformed. He was learning to live in a world that once felt impossible to navigate. And it was all because of a quiet dog who showed him the power of unconditional love. Ben's life has changed in ways no one could have expected. It wasn't a magical cure. There was no dramatic turnaround. But there was something far more powerful, a genuine connection. It was through the quiet, steady companionship of his dog that Ben began to open up to the world, not because the dog fixed him, but because the dog showed him that he was already enough. The dog didn't demand anything. It didn't ask Ben to change or be something he wasn't. It simply sat beside him, accepting him for who he was. And in that acceptance, Ben found the space to grow. His life didn't transform overnight, but with each passing day, he felt less alone. He started to feel seen, heard, and loved in a way he never had before. This story isn't just about a boy and his dog. It's about the power of connection. It's about the way we all need someone, whether human or animal, who accepts us without judgment, who shows us that it's okay to be ourselves. For Ben, that someone was his dog. For others, it might be a friend, a teacher, or a family member. But the key is compassion. The key is patience. And most of all, the key is understanding. We all have our struggles. Some are invisible, like Ben's, while others are more obvious. But the one thing we all need, no matter who we are, is the support of others. Ben's journey shows us that sometimes healing doesn't happen through words or medicine. Sometimes it happens through simply being there, offering unconditional love and understanding. And sometimes the best therapy doesn't come from a person at all. It comes from the pure, open heart of an animal. Ben's dog didn't need to say anything. It didn't need to do anything special. It just loved Ben, and that love was enough to change his life. So, remember this. It's not always the big moments that make the difference. Sometimes, it's the quiet ones. The ones where love, patience, and understanding make all the difference. Dogs truly are the most loyal companions in our lives. What did you think of this heartwarming story? Let us know in the comments. Like the video and share it with your friends. Subscribe to our channel for daily emotional dog stories. Turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Click here to watch the next story of love, loyalty, and the incredible bond we share with our paw-some friends.